Welcome back to Hannity's primary season. And next Tuesday, votes are going to be held in Colorado, Maryland, New York, Oklahoma, and Utah. And we will be bringing you the election results. My next guest is seeking the Republican nomination for Senate in Oklahoma, and if elected, would become the first African-American senator from that state. In fact, he's already been endorsed by Governor Palin, Ben Carson, also the great one, Mark Levin, and Ted Cruz. Joining us back, he's back on the show. W Shannon is here. How are you, sir?
Hey, Sean, it's good to be with you.
It's like
again.
the murderer's,
well.
That's like the murderer's row of conservatism today. It's a pretty good lineup of endorsements.
Well, we've been very blessed. You know, conservatives across the state of Oklahoma and across the country are uniting to push back against this establishment that continues to give us more debt and more spending. So I'm excited to have their endorsement.
What is, if you get to Washington, who would you model yourself after if you had to pick 1, 2, 3 guys that are there now? Ted Cruz is a big endorsement. But some people, the establishment doesn't seem to like him at all. They seem to hate him, and I look at him as a guy that's just kind of sticking by his promises.
Well, Sean, I think what everybody agrees is that we can't continue to go down the path that we're on. If we continue like we are, we'll be the first generation of Americans to allow our kids and grandkids to inherit a lower standard of living. And that's just not acceptable from the greatest nation in the history of the world. So what we know is what we've got to be focused on in this next Congress is reducing the debt. While I was Speaker of the House, I said no to all debt, and that's what we need to do in the United States of America. We're never going to get out of debt if we continue to borrow. We've got to stop the borrowing. We've got to stop being slaves to China through borrowing. We've got to get this economy moving, and the way to do it is restore free market principles.
One of the things that angers me every election cycle is how the Democrats play the race card against conservatives. Drives me nuts. Why do you think they can get away with that?
Well, you know, so oftentimes they have nothing else to run on. They don't, you know, we're the party of ideas, but let's face it, conservatives, we have our own challenges. You know, sometimes we as conservatives, we like to think that our addictions aren't as bad as the other guys. The truth is we've got Republicans that are just as addicted to the federal dole, that are just as interested in driving up more debt, driving up more spending. And we saw some of those results just a couple of weeks ago. I think people are fed up with the status quo. They're sick of people, you know, talking about race when really we should be focused on the national debt, reducing the spending, and getting back to a balanced budget. That's what we should really be talking about. That's what we're talking about in my campaign. And then
what is your position? What would you do in Iraq today?
Well, you know, certainly what we need to do, Sean, is make sure that we're supporting the #1 democracy in that region, and that's Israel. We need to make sure that America's resolve is strong. The problem with Iraq, and there are many, but the main problem we have is people around the world no longer trust America's resolve to get things done because of this president and, frankly, a Congress that has allowed him to get away with it. We've got an entire generation of people around the world who don't believe America's resolve is as strong as it can be. And so what we've got to do first is restore America's rightful place in the world place, and we do that by electing conservatives. And one of the things I think we ought to be focused on in Iraq is listening to our generals to decide what is our real interest there as it relates to being American.
You think it was a mistake to pull out early after all the bloodshed and sacrifice and treasure that was lost there?
Well, I think it's created part of the challenge. We certainly pulled out without a real plan. What we can't do is to create a situation where there's more instability in the Middle East. And I think this president has been a big part of that. And in fact, not only is it just with this issue, you look at what we've done on our entire military, whether it's reducing the number of troops or reducing spending, we've seen a disarming of America by this president, and this Congress has allowed it. In fact, when I travel around the state of Oklahoma in my race, I talk about this a lot on my website on twshannon.com. You know, defense is one of the most important reasons why governments are created. And we seem to have forgotten that in the United States of America, in Washington, D.C. We need to return our military. The world is a safer place when America is strong and when America's military is strong.
All right, TW, we'll be watching your race really closely on Tuesday. Thanks so much for being back with us. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Sean, for having me.
You bet. And